Hello, everyone, and welcome to Liisa Palatu, the CEO of Woola, a young entrepreneur that has had enough of plastic and its effect on the environment. Welcome, Liisa.
Hi, thank you for having me.
And thank you for joining us. So, to start, Liisa, tell us about your story. So, how did you come to the idea of Woola, and where are you with it today? And what's your deal?
Sure. So we founded Woola a year and a half ago, and well, it definitely hasn't been an overnight success, even though it is quite a young company. I've actually gone through my fair share of failures before getting here. So Woola is actually the 11th company that I have founded.
Wow.
Yeah, so it took some time for me to figure out how to do the startup thing. But yeah, I realized quite early on that I really like entrepreneurship. So I started my first company when I was 16, and I've been, on and off trying to build new products and companies ever since. And yeah, most of them have been quite unsuccessful, but some have even generated some revenue. So for instance, the last business that I was working on before starting Woola was my own clothing brand. So I designed and shipped my own clothes. And that's when I kind of became obsessed with packaging. So I saw the amount of plastic and plastic bubble wrap that we were using as a small company. And I realized that we don't have the luxury to wait for someone else to come and fix the plastic problem, because there is no more time left. I mean, we have to act definitely before 2030, because that's the point when a part of the climate change will become irreversible. So I kind of decided to fix packaging. So I started looking for different solutions, and I found out that the biggest problem is in bubble wrap, that there's no sustainable and scalable alternative to it, and it takes 700 years for it to degrade. And while I was looking for solutions, I read an article that said that 90% of sheep wool goes to waste in Estonia as well as in Europe. And that kind of clicked for me. I thought a sheep wool is like a fluffy and elastic material, so why not try it in packaging? And surprisingly, it turned out that it actually works very well. And we launched our first prototype, and that's when things started moving very fast. We today we have our own factory close to Tallinn, Estonia, and we have raised our pre-seed round, and our mission is to reduce single-use plastic in e-commerce by half by 2030. So that's the story in short.
Wow, that's really ambitious, and it's really cool. And I like how, it came from one problem to stumbling upon sheep wool. It's really exciting. So, talking about your pre-seed round, so you raised 450,000 from multiple prominent business angels, and you're still relatively young. And what I really love about it is that the investors said that at first they weren't actually engaged with the idea. They were like, "Whoa, sheep wool, what?" But then you took part of one accelerator, and you impressed the investors with, your grit and your work ethic. That they were like, "Whatever she's doing, we want in." So that's really quite the story. So. Talk us through a bit about the fundraising. So how did it all work, and what were the feelings, and what kind of happened?
Mm-hmm. So it all happened so fast, and I kind of felt like I have no idea what I'm doing. So it's kind of hard to look back and think what was happening in my head at that point. But we as for the round, we managed to close it very fast, because when we decided we're going to fundraise, we already had some actual results to show. We had a month's worth of revenue, and we kind of created a momentum. So we got one investor engaged, and then afterwards, it took us 2 days pretty much to close the round. But like I said before, it was at that point, it was the biggest thing that I've done, raising €500,000. So I I wasn't thinking too much about it, but it kind of felt like I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm just doing it. But yeah, as for the investors saying that they will just invest in the team, that's a very like legit argument, because the first time that I told people about this idea, they thought I was crazy. And I mean, I don't blame them, because it's a crazy idea. But once you start like actually listening to the pitch and to the story, then you realize that it makes a lot of sense, even though there are a lot of challenges. But for us, Woola was never like just a random company that we're gonna start to get rich or like to look cool in Telliskivi. It was never the case. We founded Woola to like actually save the world. So yeah, we weren't working like 9 to 5 on it, because it's not a job. It's our personal contribution towards like reducing climate change. So in the early months, and I mean, we're still in the early months, we were working a lot and putting like a lot of effort into it. So I think that's kind of what convinced the investors. So we put the work in before fundraising, I would say. And then when we like announced that we're fundraising, then we didn't really have to do that much to convince the investors, because they were already kind of convinced.
Yeah, amazing. And I remember something that you said when you moved to work on Woola full time, which kind of stuck with me, was that, I'm gonna give this a go. I have to focus on it full time, and it's either gonna be an exit or bankruptcy. So that kind of sums up the startup life really well. That was brilliant.
I
But
don't
yeah,
telling this, but I believe it happened. It sounds like me, so.
yes, brilliant. So, you know, if we think of startups, it's usually, we know the statistics. It's 9 out of 10 fail, and it's hard to get that crazy idea to take off. Or even when you have the best idea, sometimes things don't work. Sometimes you don't have the right team. Sometimes you're in the wrong place at the wrong time. So. Um, if we look at startups that raise funding, anyways, it's a small fraction of the ones that try. But when we look at how many women from all of the startups that have raised funding, uh, the numbers go like completely insane. In the Central Eastern European area, last year, women raised 1% of funding. In Estonia, it was 1.5%. So why do you think that is? Like, what? Just your thoughts on the topic.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is that fundraising or starting a business is really hard for everyone. But like you mentioned, I mean, for some reason, the statistics is that even fewer women raise money. And I think that representation plays a really big role here, because in my experience, a lot of people end up in startups by accident. It just somehow happens. You somehow found a company, you don't even know how it happened. So when you see someone looking like yourself being in this role of raising funds or being like a leader, then you consider this as an opportunity for yourself. So when you don't see people looking like yourself represented in this role, then you don't even consider it as an opportunity, and you don't accidentally end up in this role. So I think, yeah, especially like positive representation of women who have raised funds and who have succeeded, and who are like helping others in reaching that goal is like a big thing here.
Yeah, I agree. Speaking of role models, if you think about who influenced you, who are your role models?
That's a good question. I definitely have a lot of role models. When I was in college, I was studying in the Netherlands. So I felt like I'm kind of, far away from Estonia, and I was like a bit homesick. And I was so proud to be Estonian, because there were all of these like cool tech companies and startups here who were like making Estonia famous all over the world. Where I traveled, I saw that people know about Estonia because of Skype or because of like Bolt, what was then Taxify. So all of these like startup founders were definitely huge role models for me back then. And I've also been influenced by these like crazy visionaries, like for example, Peter Esterbacka, because I like his approach of not thinking and just doing things, because I think that's the reason of why many people, including women, don't start companies, because they think too much. So like my selection of role models has been like, there's been many people there. Yeah, like most of them actually from here, from Estonia.
That's really cool. Yeah, I agree. We need more role models. And it's a really good advice, especially in startups. Don't think, just do, because many
Yeah.
times you kind of figure things out along the way, and you might find solutions that you never thought of. And maybe that's also might be one reason why we see less women in business as well. Okay, on one hand, there's less role models. It's hard to become what you haven't seen, but also sometimes some women tend to overthink things. But it's also for men, so kind of don't want to generalize. But that's a very, very good point. Um, so moving on from there. So if we are already talking about sort of role models and differences between genders, if there are any. Well, there are some definite ones, but in terms of our capabilities in business, it's been proven over and over that a man and woman are just equally just as good. So, what are your thoughts on inequality in general and discrimination? Has it affected you? Do you have some stories you want to share, or generally, what can we do to make things better?
Yeah, so I don't do a lot of interviews, but every single interview that I do, I get asked the same question. Like, doesn't matter what's the focus. I always get asked if it's harder to be a CEO as a woman. And it's not just me. Like, I'm sure every single female CEO gets asked this question, but nobody really wants to answer it or like to really open this topic, because it's like a Pandora's box, and you
Yeah.
can't really win when like, it doesn't matter what kind of an approach you take, you can't like really win. So I think that, like, in general, our society is not equal at this point, but the way that we can move towards a more equal society is to start calling out stupidity. So for instance, a question like this, whether it's like harder to succeed as a CEO while being a woman, I think that's a stupid question. And I think we should call this out, because this question makes it seem like female leadership is not normal. Like, it's some kind of a miracle that you succeeded while being a woman, because actually, it is just as likely for you to succeed, doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. But this question kind of frames it in a way that female leadership is seen as an exception. So like, I think that's a way for moving towards more equality, if we actually start answering this question and being honest about when a journalist asks a stupid question, instead of like being afraid of the backlash of what happens if I start talking about discrimination. Because like I said before, like, there's no way to win. If you say that you have been discriminated, then it sounds like you're blaming discrimination for your own failures. And if you say that you haven't been discriminated, then it's some people might say that that's because there's a lot of talk about more female representation, and that the investors only invest in your business because they need to show like more female led companies in their portfolio. So yeah, I think we just need to be we need to have a bit more courage, and we need to care less about what people say when we talk about this topic.
Yeah, yeah, that's a very good point. I was recently at an event where our prime minister gave sort of intro, some few words, and she also pointed out that every time that there's an interview, people ask her like, "How is it like to be a female prime minister?" She's like, "Well, you know," and they ask her like, "Where are her kids?" Like, "Did you ask the previous prime minister that? You didn't." and it's a really good point. But however, on the note of that, it's not harder, but statistically, it is definitely harder to raise funds or get a higher salary. And it's not the problem within women. The problem lies elsewhere. The problem is in the biases in society that we expect that, somehow it's harder to be a woman. And, frankly, right now it is because we're not equal, and we should be. So yeah, it's a stupid situation to have. And to be honest, I never thought that in the year 2021 I'd have to talk about this, or I'd have to uh, raise a fund that says we only invest in women because women perform better. And then you have these naysayers who say like, oh, well, shouldn't discriminate genders like that. What about the men? Uh, but this is only my opinion. I think right now we need to kind of brute force some things a little bit. And yeah, I agree. It's stupid to put female uh, as a, differentiator, because we don't do it to men.
Yeah,
But
female prime minister, not just the prime minister.
yeah, exactly. So really, really like so many quick answers for these big questions. I really enjoyed this talk. So let's talk about maybe Woola a bit more, because this is really, I really, really like the concept. And the fact is that there's so much wrong in this world that we've overconsumed. Like I'm sitting here in my, kind of home office, and there's so much plastic around me, and I'm aware of it every day, and it's just I don't see how we can make it stop fast enough. So I really like the idea. So where do you see Woola in, let's say, the next few years? I don't know if not necessarily this 5-year plan, but what's on top of the huge goal of cutting the bubble wrap stuff in half by 2030. What's the end game for you? What you're looking for?
So yeah, I already mentioned our mission of cutting single-use plastic from e-commerce, because that's like the really key point here, and not just in packaging, but like in general, in terms of being sustainable, then we need to get rid of the single-use mentality. Nothing should be single-use at this point anymore. But we don't actually, well, I personally hate long-term plans, because, working in a startup, you see that everything changes every day. Like your whole plan gets like completely thrown out by some things that change. So I don't really make long-term plans. We do have like very actionable things that we do every month and that we plan for every month. But now we're basically in the process of redesigning our whole supply chain. So when we started looking into packaging, after we found out that there's like a huge link between this leftover sheep wool and plastic bubble wrap that doesn't degrade, and after the initial like hype of understanding that, wow, this solution is so logical and it's great, we started looking more into packaging, and we found out that perfect packaging doesn't exist, and we cannot create it overnight. There's so many like moving pieces there to be fixed. So we're kind of building our own supply chain. So we're looking into the way of how we get the raw material, as well as distribution and disposal. So what happens with the material after it's being used, to really be able to get rid of single-use plastic. And this has been a very interesting process. It's extremely challenging because we're building new supply chains, but I think it's really important to do this ground up, because that's the only way you can really be like sustainable. So both in terms of climate and as well as like socially sustainable. So we we opened our factory in Estonia end of last year. And that was really like a good crash course on how to bring sustainable ideas from paper to reality. So when we were hiring people and, you know, setting like working conditions, we were thinking about sustainability in all like spheres. So how to be like socially responsible as well as climate responsible. So yeah, like the most of our effort in the big picture goes towards building new supply chains. But if you look at like what we're doing day to day, then it's like very like action focused items. So since we raised our pre-seed round in December, right now our main goal is growth and client acquisition and growing our revenue. So when you look at like my schedule day to day, then I'm having this like tunnel vision of only focusing on customers and revenue, which is good for a short period of time. So yeah, right now we have been selling in Estonia for 5 months now. We have sold 50,000 packages, and right now we're expanding within Europe. So yeah, we're pretty much in this growth phase right now.
Really impressive. Speaking of sort of scaling and team, so you raised the funds early last year, and you've opened the factory. So how has the team grown, and what has been kind of the biggest challenges there?
Mm-hmm. So we started out as a team of 3 founders, and we're currently at 11. So we started hiring in December last year. So it's been like, yeah, 4.5 months. So it's been like a very big growth for our team. And 11 people doesn't sound like a lot, but it is in the sense that, you know, you're like when you're a startup founder in the early stages and you don't really have this experience of even like working at a company that's like where you have responsibilities, where you're managing someone, then you start out as an entrepreneur and you just want to like get things done and create value in the world and fix problems that, you know, bug you. But at one point, after you raise the first like funds, you realize like, wow, I'm a leader now. And it just like sort of happens because maybe it's not something that you wanted at first, but you have to be a leader if you really want your, like if you want to reach your goals. So it's been definitely like a huge learning curve. Managing people is definitely not an easy task, but it's very interesting. It's definitely like a way to grow personally as well, because you can't learn how to manage people like from books or from seminars. You just have to learn it by doing it, and, you know, make your own mistakes and be open for feedback. So it's been definitely a very interesting process.
Yeah, that's very, very impressive, and it's something that many people don't actually think about, you know, who haven't started their own business, that you know, you don't necessarily get that knowledge from, you know, you go to university, someone that does a business degree, and then it's like, okay, I'm going to start a business. It's not the same. It's not what is on paper, and so many like sticks and rocks are thrown at you from places where you don't actually expect. So
Yeah.
this is really cool, and it's this kind of sink or swim moment. So thank you very much for sharing that. Um, and I think it's really cool. I've been looking at your progress, how you went from, okay, I'm gonna bankrupt or exit, who knows? And then a few months later, I'm like, oh wow, she's raising me 500,000, and then there's a factory. So it's definitely you definitely have this mindset of I'm gonna go, and this is exactly what the investors said, that why they wanted to invest in you. Because even if you have never opened a factory or done anything like this, you'll figure it out. And that's what I believe in life, that, you know, no one is born with these capabilities. You'll have to just kind of figure it out or learn from others. And so it's really, really impressive.
Yeah, exactly. Like you really have to love the process, but it, you know, it doesn't come like that. You have to I think it's really important to have this experience of failure, because it wasn't like this for me all the time. Like when I started my first company when I was 16, then I didn't start it with the intention of like failing a lot and gaining
Yeah.
experience. I just wanted to like start a company. But after all of these businesses that I've tried out, I got like really used to not being successful. So when things started like working out, it was like such like joy, because I wasn't really expecting anything. So that kind of makes it easier when you have failed a lot before, and then you kind of know like what to expect, and you already expect a lot of problems coming your way, and you're just like, okay, then we will fix it if we see problems.
Yeah, that's a very good point that you probably have kind of trained to find the solutions through previous failures. So
Yeah.
it's, the success will come through learning and trying again. Uh, Someone I met has also said that sometimes he finds that some people who he finds, okay, not very smart, but they have found really, really good success in business, is that they haven't given up. And sometimes
Yeah.
that's like all you need. And then someone you see who's really intelligent tries once and goes, "Oh, I'm not good enough." So that's probably like the best thing to do is keep trying.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. I heard someone speak at, I think it was Startup Day a few years ago in Tartu, when they said that intelligence is nice to have, but it's not like necessary to start a company.
that's brilliant. Yeah, like that. It's hard work beats talent most
Yeah.
times. So that's definitely one way to see it, succeed is to not give up. So it's been really exciting hearing your thoughts, and we were talking that the representation, there's not enough women, that we don't see enough role models. So statistics show things like per one woman who's shown in media, there will be 7 male voices. And I was talking about this recently, that very often when women get invited to interviews or to talk about a topic where they are the experts at, they will go like, "Oh, I don't want to, show off or whatever." And you ask a man the same question, they're like, "Yeah, I'm in." So, what do you think on the place of like representation? Like, what could we improve here?
Hmm. Yeah, like there are a few things. I mean, I think we can definitely also emphasize this more, that women should have like more courage to see themselves as experts. But this all comes back to representation. But for instance, I think that you can see the lack of representation as an opportunity as well. Um, for example, I grew up with 3 older brothers, so I'm always used to being like the odd one out. And when I do like any kinds of like interviews or panels, and it's like usually men, especially when we're talking about like hardware startups or startups who are active in manufacturing. And then when you don't see like people like yourself represented, you can be the one to take on the challenge and say that I'm going to change this. So it's also like I guess it's like a question of how you think about it, and if you're up for the challenge, and if you're up for like changing the way that things have been done so far.
Very cool. So basically, be the change you want to see. You can't see it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really good. So it's been a really, really wonderful time talking to you, Annalisa, and I completely love your energy and what you've succeeded. Plus, also, 11 businesses in what, 10 years, 9 years?
Yeah, 10 years. Wow, it's been a while.
That's really, really cool. But I love the energy, and I know that this is gonna inspire a lot of people to, just if you have an idea, go for it. So on top of everything, that's kind of answered the next question that I'm gonna end with, but maybe there's something else that you would like to share with women or men or whoever is watching and is thinking of starting their own business.
Mhm. Yeah, there are like a lot of different approaches, and also like approaches on tips to give people that want to start a business. But I know that a lot of people will argue with me on this, but my go-to advice is always the same. It's what like I've told myself as well, that if you're thinking about starting a business, then just stop thinking and do it, because that's the only way of finding out whether it will work. So for example, if you have an idea in mind but you're not sure whether it will work, just think like, what's the quickest way of validating it, and then go to an actual customer and pitch the idea and see what they say. This like method takes way less time than writing a business plan, or just like losing sleep over the fact that you don't know whether it's going to work. So yeah, like my biggest tip is just stop thinking and just do it.
Very cool. So basically sell before you have it. Yeah, that's
Definitely. But then
that's
after you've sold it, then also have it.
yeah, actually make it, otherwise it's fraud. Yeah, that's that's really, really, really good advice. And yeah, very inspiring. I'm looking forward to seeing great things from Woola, and I just know that it's gonna, you know, make a really positive impact on the world as a whole. So thank you very much, firstly, for doing this, and also thank you for sharing your story on our show.
Thank you.
Thank you. So everyone watching, you know, wonderful ideas by Anna-Liisa and the incredible stuff she has achieved. There will be another episode next week, so come back soon, and thank you.